The tiny white werewolf pup barely moved beneath the falling snow. Each breath came slower than the last. His fur, once as white as the winter around him, had been stained crimson by wounds too deep for a creature so small to survive. Hunters rode past him one after another. Some glanced down, some laughed. Others whispered that the cursed forest had claimed another abandoned pup. Not one of them stopped. Footsteps crunched softly across the snow. A young Omega wrapped in a worn blue cloak knelt beside him. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from the freezing cold. She looked into the pup's fading blue eyes and saw something no one else did. Not a monster. Not a burden. Terrified child. "You've suffered enough," she whispered as she wrapped him inside her cloak. "You don't have to be alone anymore." She had no family, no wealth, no alpha willing to stand beside her. The entire pack treated her like someone born only to obey. Yet that single act of kindness would awaken a forgotten destiny. Because hidden beneath the body of that tiny wolf slept the last prince of an ancient royal bloodline. For 10 long years, kings had slaughtered kingdoms searching for him. Entire packs had disappeared trying to protect him. The strongest alphas alive believed the royal heir was already dead. They were wrong. He wasn't dead. He was sleeping peacefully in the arms of the weakest woman they had ever mocked. And before this story ends, every alpha who laughed at Lyra Moonshade would kneel before her. Winter had swallowed Frostwood Forest. The towering pine trees bent beneath layers of heavy snow while freezing winds screamed through the mountains like restless spirits. Most wolves avoided the cursed forest after sunset. Stories claimed something ancient still wandered between those trees. But Lyra wasn't searching for legends. She searched for healing herbs. The village healer had refused to gather medicine during the storm, forcing Lyra to risk her own life. Being an Omega meant nobody cared whether she returned. She quietly pushed deeper into the forest. Her boots disappeared beneath fresh snow with every step. The freezing air burned inside her lungs. She kept walking. "If I don't find Silverleaf tonight," she whispered, "someone else will die tomorrow." Kindness had become both her greatest strength and her greatest curse. Just as she reached the frozen river, something caught her attention. Faint sound, almost impossible to hear beneath the howling wind. Tiny whimper. Lyra froze. She listened again. Another cry. Weak, painful, barely alive. She hurried toward the sound, brushing branches aside until she reached a snow-covered hollow beneath an ancient tree. Her heart nearly stopped. Curled into a tiny ball lay a white wolf pup. His body shook uncontrollably. One paw was trapped beneath broken branches. Deep claw wounds covered his side. Fresh blood stained the snow around him. He couldn't have been more than a few months old. Lyra slowly knelt. "It's okay." The pup opened one icy blue eye. Instead of growling, he simply stared at her. His fear was stronger than his strength. Someone had hunted him. Someone had wanted him dead. Carefully, Lyra removed the broken branches. The pup whimpered as pain shot through his tiny body. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know it hurts." She tore a strip from her own cloak and wrapped his wounds. The little wolf tried to stand. His legs collapsed immediately. Without thinking twice, Lyra lifted him into her arms. He weighed almost nothing. Too light. Far too light for a growing pup. His heartbeat fluttered against her chest like it might disappear at any second. "You've been alone for a long time." The pup slowly rested his head beneath her chin. For the first time since she found him, he stopped trembling. Hours later, the lights of Moonshadow Village finally appeared through the snowfall. But peace never lasted long inside the village. The first guard noticed the wolf immediately. "Stop," Lyra obeyed. The guard narrowed his eyes. "Where did you find that thing?" "In Frostwood." His expression changed instantly. "Throw it away." Lyra blinked. "What? Didn't you hear me?" He stepped closer. "Cursed wolves come from that forest. They bring death wherever they go. Another villager approached. Then another. Within moments, nearly 20 wolves surrounded her. Old women whispered fearful prayers. Children hid behind their parents. One elderly hunter pointed directly at the pup. "I've seen those blue eyes before." Everyone fell silent. His hand shook. Many years ago, the royal family kept wolves with eyes exactly like that. Another villager laughed. "The royal bloodline is extinct. They all died." The old hunter didn't smile. "No. I remember. Those eyes. They're dangerous." Fear spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Kill it. It'll bring hunters. Throw it back into the forest. Before it's too late." The tiny pup buried his face deeper inside Lyra's cloak. She felt him shaking again. Not from the cold, from fear. She tightened her arms around him. "No." The crowd erupted. "You're choosing an animal over your own pack?" Lyra looked at every face surrounding her. Not one showed compassion. Only fear. Only hatred. "If saving one innocent life is betrayal, then I'll accept your judgment." Without waiting for permission, she walked straight through the crowd. Nobody stopped her. Not because they respected her. Because no one wanted to touch the strange white wolf. Her tiny cabin sat alone at the edge of the village. The roof leaked. The fireplace barely worked. She owned almost nothing. "Oh," she smiled. "Welcome home." The pup looked around cautiously. Lyra lit a small fire before warming fresh water. She carefully cleaned every wound. The deeper she looked, the stranger everything became. None of his injuries resembled ordinary animal attacks. They looked like sword cuts. Who would attack a tiny pup with blades? She frowned. "This doesn't make sense." The pup slowly opened his eyes. He stared into the flames. For just a second, his expression changed. Not like a frightened child. Like someone remembering something. Something terrible. Then it disappeared. He whimpered again. Lyra gently placed her hand on his head. "You don't have to remember tonight. You just need to live." She fed him warm broth one spoonful at a time. After finishing, the little wolf curled beside the fireplace. Within minutes, he fell asleep. Lyra smiled softly. "I think I'll call you Kael." The name slipped from her lips without explanation. She had never heard it before. Simply felt right. Far beyond the village, several armored riders emerged from the darkness. Black wolves twice the size of normal alphas followed silently beside them. The leader dismounted. He examined small paw prints disappearing beneath fresh snow. His crimson eyes narrowed. He survived. One assassin stepped forward. "My lord, should we alert Shadow Alpha Darius?" The leader slowly smiled. "No. If the prince truly lives, I'll claim the reward myself." Inside the cabin, the sleeping white pup suddenly whimpered. A glowing silver symbol briefly appeared beneath the fur on his forehead. It looked exactly like a royal crown surrounded by a full moon. Lyra never saw it. She had already fallen asleep beside the fire. But somewhere far away, an ancient guardian opened his eyes. "The Moonfang Heir has awakened." Morning arrived beneath a sky of cold silver clouds, but peace never reached Lyra's little cabin. She woke before sunrise as she always did. The fire had nearly gone out. The room was freezing. Yet one thing made her smile. The tiny white pup was still asleep beside the hearth, curled into a perfect ball with his tail wrapped around his nose. For the first time in what must have been days, he looked safe. Lyra quietly placed another log on the fire. The crackling warmth filled the room. Kael slowly opened his icy blue eyes. Instead of shrinking away, he looked directly at her. Then, with surprising trust, he walked over and gently rested his head against her leg. Lyra laughed softly. "So you're finally saying good morning?" The little pup wagged his tail only once. It was enough. That tiny gesture warmed her heart more than the fire ever could. But outside, the village was already whispering. Everywhere Lyra walked, conversations stopped. Eyes followed her. Children were pulled away by frightened parents. Hunters stared at Kael with open suspicion. No one greeted her. No one smiled. She had become an outcast overnight. Still, Lyra ignored them. She carried a basket of healing herbs toward the central hall where injured wolves waited every morning. Healing was the only thing no one could take from her. As she entered the hall, elder women accepted her medicine without thanks. One muttered under her breath, "The cursed animal is still alive." Another answered, "She's becoming dangerous." Lyra lowered her eyes and continued working. She had grown used to cruel words. What she wasn't prepared for was the arrival of Alpha Rowan. The hall instantly fell silent. Broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark fur cloak bearing the Mooncrest emblem, Rowan walked with the confidence of the future Alpha of Moonshadow Pack. Lyra had believed fate had chosen him for her. Years ago, during the Moon Blessing ceremony, both of them had felt the unmistakable pull of the mate bond, the sacred connection recognized by the Moon Goddess herself. But Rowan had never accepted it. He never rejected it either. He simply ignored her, leaving Lyra trapped between hope and heartbreak. Everything changed. Rowan stopped only a few feet away. His golden eyes briefly met hers. No warmth, no affection, only cold distance. "Lyra." She bowed respectfully. "My Alpha." His gaze shifted toward Kael sitting quietly beside her. "So the rumors were true. You brought that beast into our village." Lyra spoke calmly. "He's only a frightened child." A hunter scoffed. "That's what monsters always look like before they grow." Several wolves laughed. Kael lowered his ears. Lyra noticed immediately. She gently placed one hand over his back. "It's all right." Rowan watched the gesture. Something unreadable flashed across his face before disappearing. "The council has ordered the wolf removed." "No." The answer came instantly. Without hesitation. Without fear. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. An Omega. Refusing her Alpha. One council elder slammed his staff against the floor. "You dare disobey." Lyra looked around the room. "If protecting a helpless child is disobedience, then yes, I do." The atmosphere turned deadly. No one had ever spoken to the council like that. Especially not an Omega. Lady Celine entered. Beautiful. Elegant. Every movement graceful enough to fool anyone. She smiled sweetly as she approached Rowan. Without asking permission, she slipped her arm around his. The gesture pierced Lyra's heart more deeply than any blade. Celine noticed. Course she did. That was exactly why she smiled wider. "My Alpha," Celine said softly. "The villagers are frightened. They say strange riders were seen near Frostwood last night." She turned toward Lyra. And strangely enough, their arrival began the very day she brought home that animal. The crowd immediately began whispering again. Rowan frowned. "What riders?" A scout stepped forward. "We found unfamiliar tracks near the eastern border. They're heavily armed. They weren't hunting deer. They were searching for something." Celine slowly looked toward Kael. "Or someone." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then she spoke the words she had planned from the beginning. "I believe Lyra has endangered the entire pack." Several council members nodded immediately. One stood. "I propose the Omega be investigated for treason." Lyra's eyes widened. "Treason? I've done nothing wrong." Celine tilted her head sympathetically. "Then you have nothing to fear." The kindness in her voice felt more terrifying than open hatred. Because it wasn't kindness. It was a trap. By sunset, nearly the entire village had gathered in the central square. Public hearing. The worst kind. Everyone wanted to watch. No one came to defend Lyra. Kael remained close beside her. The little wolf growled every time someone stepped too near. Rowan stood before the council. His face remained unreadable. The eldest elder raised his voice. Lyra Moonshade. You stand accused of bringing danger upon Moonshadow Pack. What do you say in your defense? Lyra took a slow breath. I rescued a dying child. I would do it again. Murmurs spread through the crowd. One elder held up a torn piece of black cloth. This was found near your cabin. It belongs to the Shadow Pack. Lyra stared at it. I've never seen that before. Celine lowered her eyes dramatically. Someone must have placed it there. Then she paused. Unless. The implication alone was enough. The crowd erupted. Traitor! She invited them. Execute her. Rowan remained silent. His silence hurt more than every insult combined. Lyra looked at him. Rowan! You know me. You know I would never betray this pack. For a brief moment, he hesitated. The mate bond stirred inside him. He remembered the girl who had healed injured pups without asking for reward. The Omega who never lied. Who never sought power. But then he saw fear in the eyes of his people. Future Alpha could not appear weak. He closed his heart. The safety of the pack comes first. Lyra's expression slowly crumbled. She understood. He had chosen politics over truth. Then Rowan spoke the words that shattered everything. Before witnesses. I reject Lyra Moonshade as my fated mate. The world seemed to stop. A violent pain exploded through Lyra's chest. The sacred mate bond snapped like breaking glass. She fell to one knee, gasping for air. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to cry aloud. On her. The villagers watched in silence. Some pitied her. Most looked relieved. Celine smiled. Victory. At least, that's what she believed. Kael suddenly stepped in front of Lyra. His tiny body trembled. His lips curled back. A deep growl echoed across the square. Much deeper than any pup should have been capable of making. Several warriors instinctively stepped backward. His glowing blue eyes had changed. For one terrifying second, every wolf in the square felt the overwhelming presence of an alpha. Impossible. He was only a pup. Then the pressure disappeared. As quickly as it had come. The elders exchanged frightened glances. What was that? Celine's confident smile faded for the first time. She had seen those eyes before. Years ago. Inside a burning royal palace. Before she watched the Moonfang King die. Fear flashed across her face. No, it couldn't be. Meanwhile, far beyond Moonshadow Village, Shadow Alpha Darius received a message carried by a black raven. He unfolded the parchment. Only 6 words were written. The white pup has been found. Darius slowly smiled. So, the prince is finally within my reach. The silence that followed Kael's growl was unlike anything Moonshadow Village had ever experienced. Even the wind seemed to stop. Every wolf stared at the tiny white pup standing protectively in front of Lyra. His body was no larger than that of an ordinary cub. Yet for one impossible heartbeat, every alpha in the square had instinctively lowered their heads. Not by choice, by instinct. It lasted only a second. Then the invisible pressure vanished. Kael blinked in confusion, as though he had no idea what had just happened. He whimpered and pressed himself against Lyra's leg again. The spell was broken. The villagers looked around uneasily. Did you feel that? It felt like an alpha command. Impossible. He's just a pup. Only one person wasn't surprised. Lady Celine. She quickly hid the fear in her eyes behind another graceful smile. But instead, her heart pounded. She remembered a snowy night nearly 12 years ago. Palace consumed by flames. The Moonfang King standing alone against hundreds of enemies. His eyes. They had glowed with that exact same icy blue light. No, she thought. He died. I watched him die. So why does this animal carry the king's aura? Before she could think further, Rowan raised his hand. Enough. The crowd slowly fell silent. The hearing is over. He looked toward Lyra. You are no longer welcome inside Moonshadow territory. Gasps echoed around the square. Exile. For an Omega. It was often worse than execution. Outside the borders lived rogues, assassins, and beasts that answered to no alpha. Most exiles never survived the first winter. Rowan's voice remained cold. You have until sunrise. Leave. Lyra stared at him. For just a moment, she searched his face, hoping, begging, praying that somewhere inside him, the man she once loved still existed. But Rowan looked away. The rejection was complete. Without another word, Lyra picked up her small satchel. Kael quietly followed her. Neither of them looked back. Snow continued falling as they reached the tiny cabin. Everything she owned fit inside 2 bags. Few blankets, medicinal herbs, a worn journal, her mother's silver necklace. Nothing else. Kael watched silently as Lyra packed. Then he nudged her hand. She smiled through tear-filled eyes. I know. We'll be all right. She wasn't sure whether she was comforting him or herself. That night, neither of them slept. Something moved through the trees. Not villagers. Not hunters. Someone older. Someone who had waited many years for this moment. Just before dawn, a knock echoed against the cabin door. 3 slow knocks. Lyra frowned. Nobody visited her anymore. She carefully opened the door. Standing outside was an old traveler wrapped in a weathered gray cloak. Snow covered his shoulders. His long white beard reached almost to his waist. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They glowed faintly silver. I seek shelter. His voice was calm. Ancient. Lyra hesitated only a moment. Please come in. The old man stepped inside. His gaze slowly wandered across the cabin. Stop. Kael. The little white pup stared back. Time itself seemed to freeze. The old man's breathing became uneven. His hands trembled. He slowly removed his gloves. To Lyra's complete shock. He dropped to one knee before the tiny wolf. Kael tilted his head in confusion. The old man's voice cracked. My prince. Lyra's eyes widened. What did you say? The old traveler immediately lowered his head. He stopped himself. The words had escaped before he could hide them. Kael slowly walked toward him. Instead of fear, the pup gently touched the old man's hand with his nose. The old man closed his eyes. Tears rolled down his weathered face. So, you survived. Lyra stepped forward. Who are you? He looked at her. My name is Orion. I've wandered these lands for many years. I've been searching. His gaze returned to Kael. For someone. Lyra frowned. You called him Prince. Orion smiled sadly. I spoke too quickly. Forgive an old man's fading mind. But Lyra wasn't convinced. She had heard the emotion in his voice. That wasn't confusion. That was recognition. Kael suddenly climbed into Orion's lap without hesitation. The old guardian gently stroked the pup's white fur. You remember me, he whispered. Even if your mind does not. Lyra heard every word. What does that mean? Orion looked toward the fireplace. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. 12 years ago, a kingdom disappeared. The Moonfang Kingdom. Lyra nodded. Everyone knows that story. The royal family was slaughtered. Yes, but stories often leave out the truth. His expression darkened. The Moonfang King did not lose because he was weak. He lost because someone opened the palace gates from within. Betrayal. The single word seemed to make the room colder. The enemy entered while the royal family slept. Children, elders, warriors. No one was spared. Lyra looked down at Kael. The pup had fallen strangely quiet. As though the story hurt him, Orion continued. Only one child vanished before the killers arrived. They searched every kingdom, every mountain, every forest, but they never found him. Lyra's heart beat faster. You mean the prince? Orion slowly nodded. The last royal heir. Silence filled the cabin. Then Lyra asked the question that had been growing inside her since yesterday. Is Kael? Orion immediately stood. No. His answer came too quickly, too sharply, almost like panic. You must never ask that question again. Lyra stared at him. Why? Because if anyone hears those words, he will die. The cabin fell silent. Snow drifted gently through the frozen air. Orion lowered his voice. There are wolves who have spent 12 years hunting a child. They would burn kingdoms to find him. They would kill thousands to prevent the royal bloodline from returning. Lyra looked toward Kael. The tiny pup had fallen asleep beside the fire. His breathing was peaceful. He looked so innocent, so fragile. How could anyone fear him? Orion noticed her expression. Power frightens those who stole it. He reached inside his cloak and removed an old silver pendant. Its surface carried the image of a full moon surrounded by a crown. The moment Kael saw it, his eyes widened. A painful whimper escaped him. Suddenly, images exploded inside his mind. Fire, screaming, a woman crying, a man covered in blood shouting, "Run!" Blue flames, broken swords, a little boy reaching toward someone disappearing beneath collapsing walls. Kael cried out in pain. His body shook violently. Lyra rushed forward. It's all right. She held him close. The visions vanished. The pup buried his face against her chest, trembling uncontrollably. Orion quietly placed the pendant away. His memories are awakening. Lyra looked at him. Can they hurt him? They already are. Far away, inside the obsidian fortress known as Black Hollow, Shadow Alpha Darius sat upon a throne built from the skulls of defeated alphas. A messenger knelt before him. My lord, we've confirmed the reports. The white pup traveled with an Omega. Darius smiled. And the guardian? The messenger swallowed nervously. There are rumors. An old wolf has appeared. Darius stood. His crimson cloak swept across the floor. So Orion finally stepped out of hiding. He laughed. A cruel laugh. Good. I've grown tired of searching. He slowly drew a massive black sword. Prepare every shadow pack. We march at first light. This time, no one leaves alive. Back inside the tiny cabin, Orion quietly watched Lyra comforting the frightened pup. He closed his eyes. The prophecy. It has begun. But there was one truth, one secret, even he wasn't ready to reveal. Because Kael wasn't simply the last prince. He carried something far more dangerous. Something powerful enough to unite, or destroy, every werewolf kingdom. The first rays of dawn never reached Lyra's cabin. Dark storm clouds swallowed the morning sky, turning the snowy forest into a land of endless gray. Inside, the fire had almost burned out. Kael lay curled beside Lyra, exhausted after the terrifying visions that had haunted him through the night. Even in his sleep, his tiny paws twitched as if he were still running from something only he could remember. Orion stood silently near the window. His silver eyes watched the forest beyond. Then his expression hardened. They're here. Lyra immediately stood. Who? Instead of answering, Orion pulled back the curtain. Fresh tracks. Dozens of them. Large wolf prints circled the cabin from every direction. Not ordinary wolves. Warriors. Hunters. They had already surrounded them. A low horn echoed through the forest. Then another. Kael woke instantly. His ears flattened against his head. Fear filled his glowing blue eyes. Orion spoke calmly. Listen carefully. We don't have much time. He walked toward Lyra and handed her a folded leather map. It will lead you north, beyond the Frostfang Mountains. Hidden among those peaks is a place forgotten by every kingdom. Lyra unfolded the map. Ancient symbols covered the faded parchment. At its center, one name was written: the Sanctuary of the First Moon. "What is this place?" she whispered. Orion smiled faintly. "A place where kings were trained before kingdoms ever existed." Another horn sounded. Much closer this time. The cabin walls shook. Kael growled. Orion turned toward him. "My prince." The old guardian stopped himself. "Kael, you must protect her." The little pup looked up as though he understood every word. The front door exploded inward. Splinters flew across the room. 6 black-armored warriors rushed inside with swords drawn. "Take the wolf alive. Kill the others." Everything happened at once. Orion slammed his staff against the floor. A brilliant silver shockwave burst through the cabin. The attackers were thrown backward as though struck by a giant invisible hand. Lyra stared in disbelief. You're a guardian." Orion's eyes glowed brightly. "I was." Before another word could be spoken, more warriors poured through the broken doorway. There were too many. Orion knew they couldn't win. He looked at Lyra. "Run. I'm not leaving you. You must." Another blast of silver energy knocked back 3 more attackers. "Your life no longer belongs only to you. It belongs to him." Lyra looked down at Kael. The tiny white pup was already standing beside the back door, waiting, trusting her, with tears filling her eyes. She nodded. "I'm sorry." She grabbed Kael and sprinted into the forest. Behind her, the battle erupted. Steel clashed. Magic shook the earth. The ancient cabin collapsed beneath exploding waves of silver light. Kael looked back. He whimpered. Orion's voice echoed through the trees one final time. "Don't stop running." 4 hours. Lyra climbed frozen cliffs and crossed rivers buried beneath ice. Snowstorms hid their tracks. The map remained tightly clutched inside her cloak. Kael never complained. Even when his tiny paws began bleeding again, he simply kept following her. Every few minutes he would stop, lift his nose toward the wind, then urge Lyra in another direction, almost as though ancient instincts guided him. By sunset, they reached the base of Frostfang Mountain. The climb ahead looked impossible. Towering cliffs disappeared into clouds. No visible path. No bridge. Nothing. Lyra sighed. "We're trapped." Suddenly, Kael barked. Only once. A strange blue glow appeared beneath the snow. Lyra brushed away the ice. Stone steps, hidden for centuries. Orion's map had been right. Someone had built a secret road through the mountain. They climbed until nightfall. The higher they went, the warmer the air became. Flowers somehow bloomed beneath frozen cliffs. Waterfalls flowed untouched by winter. Finally, the mountain opened into an enormous hidden valley. Lyra froze. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. An ancient fortress stood beneath the full moon. Massive white stone walls. Silver towers. Moonlight reflected across crystal lakes surrounding the citadel. Hundreds of enormous white wolves patrolled silently, each one larger than any alpha Lyra had ever seen. Kael stepped forward without fear. The wolves immediately lowered their heads. One after another. Every guardian bowed before the tiny pup. Lyra's heart pounded. "Why are they?" She never finished the sentence. A tall warrior approached. His long silver hair flowed behind him. Ancient scars covered his face. He dropped to one knee. "Welcome home." His voice trembled. "Your Highness." Kael simply blinked, confused. The warrior looked toward Lyra. "You protected him." She nodded slowly. "I don't understand. My name is Garrick. I commanded the royal guardians of Moonfang." Lyra stared. "Royal? The kingdom didn't fall completely. We survived. We waited. For 12 years. He looked toward Kael. Waiting for our prince. Kael tilted his head. Then quietly walked toward Garrick. Instead of speaking, he gently touched the warrior's forehead with his tiny nose. Garrick closed his eyes. Tears rolled down the hardened commander's face. Our king lives. The other guardians slowly repeated the words. Our king lives. The valley echoed with voices. Not cheering. Not shouting. Whispering. As though afraid the mountains themselves might reveal their secret. Days passed. For the first time since finding Kael, Lyra finally slept without fear. The sanctuary became their new home. The royal healers treated Kael's wounds. The guardians repaired Lyra's worn clothing. She expected to be treated like a servant. Every warrior bowed respectfully whenever she passed. First it embarrassed her. Then Garrick explained. You saved our future. There is no greater honor. Kael also began changing. His appetite doubled. His strength increased every day. He learned frighteningly fast. Within weeks he could outrun wolves twice his size. Within months, he could sense hidden enemies before anyone else. Sometimes, he stared toward the moon for hours, as though listening to voices no one else could hear. One night, everything changed. The full moon hung directly above the sanctuary. Kael suddenly cried out. Blue light erupted around his body. Lyra rushed toward him. Kael! The ground shook violently. Every guardian ran into the courtyard. Magic spiraled toward the sky. Kael's tiny body began growing. His bones shifted. His muscles expanded. White fur shimmered like silver beneath the moonlight. The transformation wasn't into a full-grown alpha. Not yet. But when the light finally disappeared, the helpless little pup was gone. Standing before Lyra was a white wolf nearly the size of a horse. Not a child anymore. A young prince entering his true strength. His icy blue eyes met Lyra's. For one brief second, she saw intelligence far beyond his years. Recognition, memory, purpose. Then he slowly lowered his enormous head. Just as he had when he was only a tiny pup. Lyra smiled through tears. She gently placed her hand against his forehead. You've grown so much. Kael closed his eyes. And for the very first time, he spoke. Only one word. Softly. Almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Mother. Lyra froze. The guardians looked at one another in stunned silence. But before anyone could speak, a watchtower bell rang wildly across the sanctuary. Once. Then again. A scout raced into the courtyard. His face had turned pale. Commander. Garrick stepped forward. What happened? The scout struggled to breathe. Our outer defenses. They've fallen. Shadow Alpha Darius has found the sanctuary. Far below the mountain, thousands of black-armored wolves marched beneath burning banners. And standing at the front, smiling as he looked toward the hidden kingdom, was Darius himself. The hunt, he whispered, is finally over. The sanctuary did not feel safe anymore. Even before the war horns reached the mountains, the air had changed. Lyra felt it first. A pressure in her chest, like the world itself was holding its breath. Kael stood at the edge of the courtyard, his massive white form motionless beneath the moonlight. His glowing blue eyes no longer carried confusion, only awareness, and something deeper, something painful. Garrick approached carefully. Your Highness. We must prepare defenses. Kael did not respond. Instead, his gaze drifted upward toward the sky. And then, he saw it. Flash. A memory breaking through the cracks of his mind. Fire. Screams. A crown falling into blood. Lyra noticed immediately. Kael. The moment she spoke his name, the world shattered inside his mind. Kael collapsed. A violent roar echoed across the sanctuary as energy exploded outward from his body. Every wolf in the valley dropped to their knees. Even Garrick struggled to stay standing. Lyra rushed forward. Hold him. Kael's body convulsed. Images poured into him like a storm. A throne room burning. A man kneeling with a sword in his chest. A woman screaming his name. And then, face. Not Lyra. Not Garrick. Someone else. A woman standing behind a broken royal seal. Smiling. Kael's eyes snapped open. And for the first time, his voice was no longer that of a confused child. It was deeper. Heavier. She did it. Lyra froze. What are you saying? Kael slowly stood. His massive white body trembled under the weight of memory. The palace fell because someone opened the gates. His eyes narrowed. I saw her. Garrick stepped forward. Who, my king? Kael hesitated. Then the truth struck like lightning. Celine. The name alone silenced the valley. Lyra felt her blood run cold. Rowan's Luna. Kael turned toward her. There was never a rebellion. It was betrayal from within. A storm began forming above the sanctuary. Dark clouds twisted unnaturally. Kael's voice grew heavier. They killed my father. They killed my mother. And she. His claws tightened. Watched it happen. Lyra stepped closer. Kael. How do you know this is real? He looked at her. And for a moment, the alpha inside him faded. Only the boy remained. I feel it. A second memory broke through. Stronger. Clearer. Kael gasped. No. His voice cracked. They didn't just kill the king. They tried to erase me. Silence fell. Even Garrick looked shaken. What do you mean? Kael's gaze darkened. They used blood magic. To hide me. To turn me into something no one would search for. Lyra slowly whispered. A pup. Kael nodded. And the only reason I survived. He looked directly at her. Is because someone protected me. Lyra felt her heart tighten. I didn't know who you were. I just couldn't leave you there. Kael stepped closer. You saved the last heir of Moonfang. Then softer. You saved me. Before Lyra could respond, a distant explosion shook the mountain. The sanctuary bells rang violently. War had arrived. Garrick turned. They breached the lower gates. Kael's body shifted instantly. His alpha instincts took control. Prepare the guardians. His voice no longer trembled. Now it commanded. The wolves around him bowed immediately. Lyra grabbed his arm. Kael, wait. He stopped. For her. Only for her. She looked into his eyes. Don't lose yourself. Something flickered in him. For a moment, the raging alpha calmed. I won't. Then he turned away. And the boy was gone again. Below the mountain, the sky burned red. Shadow Alpha Darius stood at the front of his army. Behind him, thousands of wolves howled in synchronized fury. The Frostfang cliffs trembled under their advance. Darius smiled. Break the gates. Bring me the heir. A warrior approached. My lord. The sanctuary is protected by royal guardians. Darius laughed. Then they will die like the rest. He raised his sword. Dark energy spiraled upward. The Moonfang bloodline ends today. And with a single swing, the battlefield erupted. Inside the sanctuary, Kael stood at the edge of the cliff. He saw everything. The invading army. The burning sky. The dying horizon. Garrick approached. They outnumber us 10-1. Kael did not blink. Then we end it quickly. Lyra stood beside him. Kael. He turned slightly. This time softer. I know. I promised I wouldn't lose myself. He looked at the battlefield again. But I will end this. Then the truth of who he had become finally surfaced. I am no longer the pup you saved. His eyes glowed brighter. I am what they tried to erase. The wind screamed. Kael stepped forward. And for the first time, the world felt his full presence. Not as a child. Not as a survivor. But as something far more dangerous. A king awakening in war. Down below, Darius raised his blade again. "Show yourself, Heir." A massive roar answered him from the cliffs above. The mountains shook. Snow collapsed in waves. And from the glowing sanctuary gates, a white figure emerged. Standing alone. Behind him, Lyra watched in silence. And behind her, the entire royal guardian army bowed. Kael's voice echoed across the battlefield. "You came for a child." His eyes darkened. "But you will face a king." Darius smiled. Finally, the two forces stared at each other across the valley. The war began. The battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It had become a storm of blood, steel, and shattered howls. Kael stood at the edge of the sanctuary cliffs as the first wave of Shadow Pack warriors surged upward like a living tide. Below him, thousands of wolves charged through the frozen valley. Above him, the moon trembled behind dark smoke. And inside him, something ancient was finally waking completely. Lyra stood behind Kael, her cloak whipping violently in the wind. She watched him closely, not as a pup anymore, not even as the boy she had saved, but as something far more dangerous. A king standing on the edge of becoming a legend. Garrick raised his sword beside her. "Royal guardians, form ranks." The white-armored warriors moved instantly, forming a defensive line along the cliffside. But Kael raised his hand. "Wait." Everyone froze. Even Garrick. Kael's eyes narrowed as he studied the battlefield below. Then he spoke softly. "They are not here to negotiate. They are here to erase us." Cold silence followed. Lyra stepped forward. "Then what do we do?" Kael turned slightly toward her. For a moment, the alpha disappeared. Only the boy remained. "I end it." And then, he jumped. The entire cliffside erupted in shock. "Kael!" Lyra screamed as his massive white form plunged into the battlefield alone. But he didn't fall. He landed. And the ground shattered beneath him. A shockwave of white energy exploded outward, throwing dozens of Shadow Pack warriors into the air. Silence hit the battlefield for half a second. Fear. 'Cause they felt it. That pressure. That presence. The bloodline they had spent years hunting had finally arrived in full force. Darius stood far below, watching the chaos unfold. His smile widened. So, the prince finally learned to walk like a king. Kael slowly lifted his head. His eyes met Darius's across the battlefield. And in that moment, Kael remembered everything. Not fragments, not flashes, everything. The betrayal, the fire, the crown breaking under blood-soaked stone. His mother's last breath. His father's final command. Survive. No matter what they turn you into. Kael's claws tightened. The air cracked. A massive pulse of energy rippled outward. The battlefield froze. Even Darius's army hesitated. Kael's voice dropped into something deeper than thunder. "You took everything from me." And still, I lived. The ground beneath him cracked in a spiral. White light exploded from his body. His form began to change. Not into a pup. Not into a beast. But into something in between. A fully awakened alpha king in his true primal state. His fur turned silver white. His eyes burned like twin moons. The sky itself darkened in response. Lyra watched from the cliffside, breathless. "This is his real power." Garrick whispered beside her. "No, that is only the beginning." Below, Darius finally stepped forward. "Enough." He raised his blade. Dark energy consumed it entirely. "You are not a king. You are a mistake that survived too long." Kael tilted his head slightly. Almost calm. Almost pitying. He moved. One step. And the entire battlefield reacted. Shadow Pack warriors collapsed instantly, clutching their heads in pain. Their alpha instincts were being crushed. Darius widened his eyes. "What?" Kael was suddenly in front of him. No warning. No sound. Just presence. Darius barely managed to block the strike. Clang. The impact shattered the ground beneath them. Darius slid back, shocked. "You're fast." Kael didn't respond. He attacked again. This time, Darius was thrown into the air. The Shadow Alpha crashed into a ruined tower, exploding through stone. Silence followed. Lyra's breath caught. "He's overwhelming him." Garrick nodded slowly. "No. He is dismantling him." Darius rose slowly from the rubble. Blood ran down his face. And for the first time, his smile disappeared. "You think power makes you a king?" Kael walked forward. "You destroyed a family. You burned a kingdom. You hunted a child for 12 years. And still you speak." Darius laughed weakly. "You still don't understand. I didn't act alone." Kael stopped. That single pause changed everything. Darius pointed upward. "You want truth? Then look behind you." Kael's eyes narrowed slightly. But he didn't turn. Instead, Lyra did. And her blood ran cold. Because standing at the top of the cliff was Rowan. And beside him, Lady Selene. Lyra's voice broke. "Rowan!" He looked down. Not at Kael. Her. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Horror. Regret. Understanding. Selene smiled gently. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Everything coming together." Kael slowly turned his head upward. His gaze locked onto Selene. And something inside him snapped. The memory returned fully. The betrayal. The gate opening. The royal seal broken from within. His voice was quiet. "You." Selene tilted her head. "Yes." Kael's energy changed. The battlefield darkened. Even Darius stepped back slightly. Kael whispered. "You were never just an observer. You were the beginning." Selene's smile widened. "Finally. You remember." The wind stopped. The war paused. And in that silence, a truth long buried finally surfaced. The Moonfang Kingdom did not fall by invasion. Fell by design. And Kael was never just the heir. He was the key. The final weapon. The last living consequence of a betrayal that shaped every kingdom. Kael's eyes burned brighter than ever before. "I will end this." Selene smiled. "No. You will complete it." And in that single sentence, the world began to fracture again. The battlefield no longer felt like a war. It felt like a confession waiting to explode. Rowan stood frozen at the edge of the cliff, staring down at everything he had refused to see for years. The white Alpha King in his awakened form. Lyra. The Omega he had discarded like she meant nothing. And Selene. The woman standing beside him with a smile that no longer felt human. For the first time in his life, Rowan couldn't breathe properly. Lyra's voice cut through the wind. "Rowan!" It was broken. Not angry. Not hateful. Just broken. "You were here this whole time." Rowan didn't answer immediately. Because if he did, everything he believed about himself would collapse. Selene stepped forward smoothly. "Don't listen to her, my Alpha." Her voice was soft, controlled, perfect. "The battle is almost over. We only need to finish what we started." Kael's gaze lifted slowly toward them. And the moment his eyes met Selene's, the air changed again. Sharper, colder, more dangerous. Kael spoke quietly. "You." Selene smiled brighter. "Yes, little prince." That word, little, it triggered something inside him. Memory. Not fragmented anymore. Complete. Kael's voice deepened. "You stood in my home. You smiled while it burned." Selene tilted her head. "I did more than that." Silence. Even the battlefield paused. Rowan turned toward her slowly. "What is he saying?" For the first time, Selene hesitated, just for a fraction. But Kael continued. "You opened the gates. You marked the guards. You let them in." Kael stepped forward. "And then you watched my family die." The wind howled violently. Lyra's hands trembled. No, Rowan whispered. That's not possible. Celine sighed softly, as if disappointed the truth had taken so long. It was necessary. That single sentence shattered everything. Rowan turned fully toward her. What did you just say? Celine finally dropped the mask. Her expression sharpened. Do you think kingdoms fall by accident, Rowan? Do you think power survives through kindness? She stepped closer to him. I chose the winning side. Rowan staggered back slightly. You betrayed the Moonfang Kingdom. Celine laughed softly. No. I corrected history. Kael's energy flared. The battlefield cracked beneath his feet. Lyra stepped forward instinctively. Kael, don't lose yourself. But he wasn't losing himself anymore. He was finding it. Completely. Rowan suddenly fell to his knees. Not from injury. From realization. Everything he ignored. Every doubt. Every contradiction. It all aligned too perfectly. Celine had always been there. Always close to power. Always influencing decisions. Always guiding him away from Lyra. His voice broke. Why? Celine looked down at him. Because you were easy to control. And because the heir had to disappear. Rowan's eyes widened. The heir. His gaze slowly moved toward Kael. You mean him? Celine nodded. Of course. Kael stepped forward again. Each step made the ground tremble. Celine raised her hand slightly. And now, it's time to finish what was started. Suddenly, a dark pulse erupted from her body. Symbols appeared in the air. Ancient. Forbidden. Lyra felt her chest tighten. Blood magic. Garrick shouted from below. Everyone fall back. But it was already too late. The sky fractured. A massive seal formed above the battlefield. And Kael froze. Pain shot through him instantly. He dropped to one knee. Lyra screamed. Kael! She ran forward. But an invisible force pushed her back. Celine smiled. This is the chain that kept you hidden, Prince. The final lock. Kael gritted his teeth. You can't control me. Celine leaned forward slightly. I already did. The seal tightened. Kael's vision blurred. For a moment, he wasn't on the battlefield anymore. He was back in the burning palace. Child again. Running. Falling. Being erased. His breath shook. No. Lyra reached him through the pressure. Her hand barely touched his arm. Kael, look at me. Her voice cut through the illusion. Just enough. Kael's eyes flickered. Lyra's face anchored him. And something inside him broke free. Not rage. Not fear. Something deeper. Trust. He grabbed her hand. And the seal cracked. Celine's eyes widened. What? Kael stood slowly. Blood magic resisted him. The sky trembled. But he spoke one word. Enough. And the seal shattered completely. A shockwave erupted across the valley. Celine was thrown backward. For the first time. Fear appeared on her face. Rowan looked up in disbelief. He broke it. Kael stepped forward. Now fully free. Now fully awake. His voice was calm. I was never your weapon. I was your ending. Celine screamed. No. But Kael moved faster than sound. One strike. Not violent. Final. The seal collapsed. The battlefield fell silent. Celine dropped to her knees. Her power gone. Her control gone. Her legacy unraveling in seconds. Rowan stared at her. Then at Kael. Then at Lyra. And something inside him finally shattered completely. He whispered, What have I done? Kael didn't look at him. Because Rowan was no longer the enemy. Just a man too late to matter. Kael turned toward Celine. You don't get forgiveness. You get truth. Celine looked up weakly. And for the first time, she smiled sadly. Then end it. Kael didn't hesitate. But before he moved, Lyra stepped forward. Kael. He stopped. She looked at him softly. Not as a king. Not as a weapon. But as the child she once saved. Don't become what they made you. Silence. Kael's expression softened slightly. The rage didn't disappear, but it bent, controlled. He turned back to Selene. And instead of destruction, he spoke. You will live. Selene blinked. What? Kael's voice was final. And remember, was every breath. And what it cost. The wind went still. Selene broke down silently. Not in defeat, but in realization. The true punishment had begun. Rowan closed his eyes. Tears finally falling. Lyra. She didn't look at him. Not anymore. Because everything he was had already ended long before this moment. Kael walked back toward her. The war behind them slowly fading into silence. But one truth remained. Darius was still out there. And the final phase of the war had not yet begun. Silence after war is never peaceful. It is heavy, like the world is waiting for the next scream. The battlefield beneath Frostfang Mountain lay shattered. Ice cracked, blood frozen midstream, banners burned to ash. And in the center of it all, Kael stood still, not breathing heavily, not shaking, just watching what remained of the people who tried to erase him. Lyra stood beside him, her hand still slightly trembling from what had just happened. But her eyes were no longer afraid. They were awake. Garrick approached cautiously. My king. Darius has retreated. Kael didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Something was wrong. Not over. Not finished. A distant horn echoed. Not from the battlefield. From behind them. From the sanctuary. Lyra turned sharply. No. The sky above Frostfang lit up again, but not with natural light. With fire. Black smoke rose from the hidden valley. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. They attacked the sanctuary. Garrick froze. That's impossible, we left guards. Kael interrupted. Not him. Was. Darius didn't retreat. He divided the war. Lyra's heart dropped. The children, the healers. Before she could finish, Kael moved. Wind exploded around him as he launched into the sky, transforming into his alpha form mid-leap. A streak of white lightning cut through the clouds. Lyra shouted after him. Kael! But he was already gone. Back at the sanctuary of the first moon. Everything was burning. The once sacred valley had turned into a nightmare. Royal wolves fought desperately against shadow pack assassins pouring through broken gates. The crystal lakes were stained red. The moon above looked dim, as if even it refused to watch. Darius stood at the center of the chaos, calm as ever. This is what kings built. He smiled. And what kings destroy. A guardian charged him. Darius didn't even turn. One flick of his blade. The guardian collapsed. Another. A shadow fell across the burning sky. Darius finally looked up. And smiled. You came. Kael landed between them like a falling star. The impact shattered the ground in a massive circle. Silence hit instantly. Every warrior stopped fighting. Even Darius's army hesitated. Because Kael was no longer just an alpha. He was something worse. Something final. Lyra arrived seconds later with Garrick and the remaining guardians, taking position behind Kael. Her voice shook slightly. This is it. Kael didn't answer. His eyes locked onto Darius. You touched what was mine. Darius laughed softly. So possessive. You really think a throne makes something yours? Kael stepped forward. It doesn't. Was. Blood does. Darius raised his sword. Then come take it back. The final battle began without warning. Kael moved first. No hesitation. No mercy. Just motion. The ground exploded beneath his steps as he collided with Darius mid-air. Steel screamed. Shockwaves ripped through the valley. Lyra could barely follow their movements. Garrick whispered in disbelief. This is beyond alpha level. Darius blocked another strike, sliding backward across burning stone. You've grown stronger. Kael's voice was cold. I stopped growing when you started running. A flicker of rage crossed Darius's face. He swung. Dark energy erupted outward. Kael didn't dodge. He caught it. With his bare hand. The entire attack shattered. For the first time, Darius stepped back. Impossible. Kael walked forward slowly. You hunted me as a child. You burned my family as they slept. You turned kingdoms into graves. And still you breathe. Darius snarled. I built this world. Kael's eyes darkened. Then you can watch it end. Kael struck. This time. The battlefield cracked open completely. Darius was slammed into the ruins of the sanctuary gates. He coughed blood. Lyra watched in silence. This wasn't rage anymore. It was judgment. Darius struggled to stand. You think killing me fixes anything? Kael stepped closer. I don't think. I decide. Darius suddenly laughed. Louder. Broken. Then you're already what they feared you'd become. Kael stopped. For the first time. Darius's smile widened. Yes. There it is. The truth. Kael's eyes narrowed. What truth? Darius coughed, barely standing. That you were never meant to survive this. You were meant to inherit it. Silence. Even Lyra froze. What? Darius turned his gaze upward. To break a kingdom. You don't destroy the heir. You shape him. Kael's expression tightened. Darius whispered. You were never just the prince. You were the final weapon of Moonfang. Kael's breath slowed. Something inside him shifted. A buried truth trying to surface again. Darius smiled faintly. And now you've activated it. Kael's eyes flickered. For a fraction of a second. The battlefield warped. Voices echoed in his mind. Not memories. Commands. Lyra stepped forward. Kael, stop listening to him. But Darius continued. You feel it, don't you? The pull. The crown inside you. Kael's claws tightened. The air trembled. And then, a second presence awakened inside him. Not rage. Not memory. Something ancient. Something royal. His voice dropped. What did they do to me? Darius smiled weakly. Everything. And then, he collapsed. Not from injury, but from release. His final breath carried one last truth. You were the end, before you were born. Silence fell. The war stopped. Even the flames seemed to hesitate. Kael stood still. Lyra slowly approached him. Kael. He didn't move. His eyes were distant. No longer on the battlefield. Somewhere deeper. Inside himself. A faint crack appeared in the sky above them. A glowing royal seal. Not broken. Awakened. And from it, a voice older than the kingdoms themselves whispered. Heir of Moonfang, your true name awaits. Kael looked up slowly. And for the first time, he was afraid. The sky above Frostfang Mountain had changed. The war was over. But the world had not settled. The glowing royal seal remained suspended above the battlefield like a wound in reality itself. Kael stood beneath it. Silent. Lyra approached slowly, every step careful, as if she feared the moment would break him. Behind them, the last remnants of Darius's army had surrendered or fled into the burning horizon. Rowan stood among the ruins too. But no one looked at him anymore. Not even Celine, who now sat in silence, her earlier pride completely gone. Because something greater than revenge was unfolding. Something older than war. The seal in the sky pulsed once. Then again. And Kael finally spoke. My name. His voice was different now. Not Alpha. Not boy. Something deeper. Is not Kael. Lyra froze. Garrick stepped forward slightly. My king. But Kael raised his hand. No. I was never only your king. The seal above him cracked open slightly. A beam of moonlight struck his chest. And memories, not pain this time but truth, flowed into him like a river finally finding its source. He saw everything. Not just betrayal. Not just war. But before that, before the crown, before the kingdom, before even the Moonfang line, a different origin, a guardian lineage. Lyra's breath caught. What are you seeing? Kael turned toward her slowly, and for the first time in his life, he looked peaceful. I see why I was saved. The seal widened, and the truth fell like thunder. Kael was not only the heir of Moonfang. He was the convergence of two ancient bloodlines. The Moonfang royal line, rulers of power. The guardian line, protectors of balance. And the only reason he survived the massacre was because the guardian line had hidden him inside a wolf form. But there was more. Kael stepped forward. The seal reacted to him like a living thing. And Lyra suddenly felt something inside her chest ignite. Kael turned sharply toward her. Lyra! Her eyes widened. Yes. The seal pulsed again. And Kael whispered. You were not random. Silence. You were chosen. Lyra's voice trembled. For what? Kael walked closer. To wake me. To stop me. And to save what I would become. The sky cracked open wider. And suddenly, Lyra's memories shifted. Not her own. Something buried inside her blood. Ancient symbols. A forgotten lineage. The guardian family. Her knees weakened. No, that can't be. Kael nodded. It is. You are the last guardian born Omega. A silence so deep it swallowed the battlefield. Rowan stepped forward in shock. Lyra! But she didn't hear him. Her world was collapsing. Everything she thought she was not random survival. It was design. Kael continued softly. My fate was destruction. Yours was prevention. And together. He looked up at the seal. We were meant to rewrite the ending. The seal began collapsing inward. Not breaking. Transforming. The sky itself was reshaping. Lyra stepped forward. Kael, what happens now? Kael looked at her. And for the first time, he smiled. Not as an alpha king. Not as a weapon. But as someone finally free. Now. We choose. The seal released one final pulse. A voice echoed across every kingdom. The throne is empty. Who will decide what the world becomes? Silence. Every warrior. Every alpha. Every surviving kingdom heard it. Rowan dropped to his knees. Celine lowered her head in shame. Garrick waited. The world waited. Kael turned to Lyra. And for the first time, he didn't command her. Yes. What do we become? Lyra stepped closer. Her voice was steady now. Not Omega. Not weak. Not broken. Not what they made us. Something better. Kael closed his eyes. And the seal finally shattered. Not into destruction, but into light. The kingdoms did not fall. They changed. No more shadow alpha rule. No more forced mates. No more hidden bloodline wars. Kael became not just Alpha King, but the first Moon King of Balance. Lyra stood beside him, not as mate, not as servant, but as guardian of the Moon Throne. Rowan disappeared from power. Celine was exiled into silence, forced to live with the truth she created. And Darius became a name written only in history as the last shadow of a broken era. One night, under a peaceful full moon, Lyra and Kael stood together overlooking the restored kingdoms. Kael spoke softly. I was a weapon. Lyra shook her head. No. You were a child. Who survived long enough to become a king. Kael looked at her. And you? Lyra smiled faintly. I was just someone who didn't look away. The wind moved gently through the valley. Peace had no roar. No war cry. Only silence. And for the first time in centuries, that silence was safe. Kael reached out. Lyra took his hand. And together, they ended the story the world thought was already written. Not with revenge, but with choice.